Well, Kim, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, and a little bit about your background.
Okay. I'm a child of the Vietnam War. My dad was in Vietnam when I was born, and we lived in Calhoun with my mom's parents at the time, and he got home when I was 9 months old. So I think that shaped a lot about my family.
Wow.
So we moved to Atlanta and Smyrna for him to go to computer school. It was the punch cards back then, yeah.
I remember punch cards.
So we lived near Piedmont Park, and then we lived in Smyrna for a while and came back to Calhoun. And then we moved to Cartersville when I was a teenager. And so I would drive from Cartersville to Kennesaw State every day when I was in college, and then as soon as I graduated, I got married and moved to Marietta and started making the drive in the other direction.
What year did you graduate from Kennesaw State?
89.
Okay. So, well, Betty Siegel was there, and we had about,
Yes.
well, we had under 10,000 students in 89.
Yes, it was probably about the same size as my high school. I graduated from Cass High School in
Okay.
Cartersville.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So I had a career in education for, this makes 31 years.
Okay.
Started out.
Where all did you teach?
I started out at Cartersville High, where I taught English and drama and psychology. And then I got my master's in counseling and went to Allatoona Elementary in Bartow County,
Where did you go for your master's?
West Georgia.
Okay.
And then I went to Lincoln Memorial in Tennessee for my specialist degree in
Okay.
school administration.
Why out there?
They had a program that fit budget and timeline and everything. It was a cohort group that was a year long. So we did 2 summers and then once a month.
Yeah.
And of course had a lot of distance learning kind of thing.
Oh,
And
okay.
it was a great program. I learned a lot.
Right up on the Tennessee-Kentucky border?
Yes,
Wow. And then, number of years of teaching. Let's see, I think in your write-up, you said you were married in 89, about the same time you graduated from
Yes,
Kennesaw then. And your husband, Kevin, had only lived in Marietta?
only Marietta. And so I joke that I've lived on every exit from Atlanta to Calhoun.
Okay.
So, down
All right.
I-75, yeah.
Okay.
Yep, so my parents lived in Cartersville when we got married, but now they're back in Calhoun. So Acworth was in between the two families. Plus, we were starting a school for dyslexia, and there was nothing up this way, and we were going to church up this way. So we moved here from East Cobb in 2004 and started our
That's
school.
what I was going to ask you next, is what attracted you to Acworth?
So much. I had worked at North Cobb Christian for a little while before we found out my daughter was dyslexic. And so I was the academic counselor and head of the counseling department and records department. And so I got to know the downtown again from Henry's Louisiana Grill, being in the first space that they were in, the little space. And then we ended up buying a house here in 2004. And now Henry lives across the street from me.
Oh, really?
So he's a
Okay.
little bit responsible for it. But we just really liked the lake. It had been, it had been closed for a while and reopened, and all the redevelopment that was going on. And we needed a house that had a place for an in-law suite for Kevin's parents.
Okay.
And we had called Joe Sellers, who was he was on a couple of boards here and was a good Acworth citizen, and he had built our house and lived there with his wife and family. And so I had called him and told him what we were looking for. And so when he called me back, he said, "Well, that's my house. Do you want to buy my house?" And I laughed, and I said, "Well, your house is not for sale." And he said, "Well, what if it were?" And I said, "Well, I'd buy it." So we ended up buying it, and after we closed on the house, he didn't tell me this until after, like on Wednesday, his wife wasn't eating dinner, and he said, "Why aren't you eating?" And she said, "Because I'm praying and fasting about whether or not we should sell the house." And he said, "Well, that's a good idea. I'll do that tomorrow." So on Thursday, he did, and then on Thursday night, I started talking to my husband, and I was like, I really think we need to call Joe and talk to him because he knows the area that we're looking at. And so I called Friday and left a message describing their house.
Yeah.
So I feel like, this is where we are supposed to be.
What's the history of the house?
It was built in 2000, or 99, and it was built from a 1940s house plan.
Okay.
So it's a newer house. We're on Seminole Drive, which is one of the 3 streets that go down to Lake Acworth. And they had bought the lot from Miss Allen. Her brother-in-law had gotten the lot in the lottery in the 30s and never built on it.
Okay.
So she and her husband had bought it from him, and it was part of their home, and so she sold it. I think it was her garden.
Lottery. Are you talking about the 1830s lottery?
I think they did another one in Acworth.
1930s? Well, I don't know anything about that.
Okay, I think it was just they had divided up the property that was it the Autry House where the teacher's parking lot is now, over by McCall Primary? And so they had divided up that estate.
I see.
And apparently there was a land lottery to see who could get those lots. But I'm not positive about that, but that was my understanding.
How did the lottery work?
I don't know. I don't know anything about that. I just know that she and her husband had gotten one lot, and her brother-in-law had gotten another, but that he never built on his.
Talk about Seminole Drive a little bit. You have some warm memories of that, I think.
I do. In the Acworth history book that Abby Parks had worked on, there's a picture of neighbors on Seminole grilling, and there are all these grills spread out. And it said that that residents would get together for impromptu barbecues, and that was taken back in the 30s or 40s, and we still do that. We don't necessarily get together on an empty lot. So I don't know. I think the empty lot was like across the street and down from me where there were tennis courts at one time. But we still gather together. It'll be like, oh, what are you doing tonight? Come on, let's have game night. Or like the women will play bunco once a month. And so we still get together and do that, just impromptu gatherings of all the neighbors.
Wow.
And I say we know all the names of the neighbors and their dogs.
Okay. How did you meet Abby Parks?
I met her through, when I first came here, I was on Historic Preservation Commission and met her through HPC.
Okay. How did you get on the Preservation Commission?
We were trick-or-treating the first year that we were here. We moved in October, and so we went trick-or-treating with the neighborhood kids. And so one of the moms, Alicia Plumley, who's still on it, I was telling her how excited I was to actually be able to go up to the doors and look inside the houses and see the houses and yards and gardens or whatever, and that I was just really enjoying it. And so she said, you should be on Historic Preservation Commission. We have an opening. So I was very excited to do that.
Yeah. When did you get involved with the Downtown Development Authority?
That was 2009.
Okay.
So I think I started with historic preservation either end of 2004, beginning of 2005. And then 2009 is when I went over to, or 10 was when I went over to DDA.
And you're the chair now?
I'm the chair now, yes.
Okay.
I started out asking lots and lots of questions,
Yeah.
but now, yeah, I'm chairing the committee.
Why don't you talk about some of the things that you've accomplished over the last decade on the Downtown Development Authority?
Wow. Some of the big things, Santa's arrival was already a big thing, but we kind of added a little bit to it, so there was a little bit more throughout the Christmas time for families to do and make traditions. We, at one point, were doing some caroling and some like history talks about the houses downtown. We've done, now we just have Christmas in Acworth after Santa's arrival, which is Santa. There are a couple at the depot this year, thank goodness, now that that's finished. And we had him there the next 2 Saturdays, and then we had horse and carriage rides. So that's a little something extra that we brought to downtown at Christmas. the storefronts on Main Street, some of them had lights on them, some didn't. The ones that did, they might be falling off or not working or whatever. And so we did have some money in our account. And that was probably our first big project after I became chair, was to replace all the lights that were on the storefronts.
Okay.
And so we used lights that were not very expensive. They're LED, so they're not that expensive to run. So we don't just do it at Christmas, we do it all the time. So that was a big thing that we did. But the latest thing would be with the bonds, where we were able to build the pedestrian bridge, and then we were able to do the depot and the depot park and the roundabout and the little plaza on to the right of Southside Drive where Cherokee and Southside meet. So a lot of wonderful things there. We were signing all the papers one day, and so after that, my cousin came into town. He lives in Hawaii, so we were down at the lake kayaking with him and his dad and his daughter. And so we're paddling along, and I hear one of the Acworth Parks employees, Clem, yelling, Kim! from the beach. And I'm like, I guess I better go see what's going on. So I paddle up, and he says, there's one more page to sign, and it has to get to the courier in an hour. So I was soaking wet. So I said, okay. He said, I can take you in the truck. And I'm like, no, I'm going to go home and put on some dry clothes first.
Yeah, for sure. How long have you been involved with the Acworth Business Association?
Probably since about 2010 or 11, probably about the same time as DDA. And one thing that happened there is DDA and tourism and Acworth Business Association were all kind of doing their own things, and there wasn't much coordination between the three. And so that's one thing that I've worked on, is bringing coordination between the three of those and getting them to work together.
You're the president for next year?
For next year, yes. I wouldn't do it until my daughters were out of the house and had a few things taken care of. So now that my oldest daughter is 24 and my younger one's 23, they both have their own homes now, so I've got a little more time on my hands.
Okay. I believe that the Acworth Business Association's meeting is when the State of the City address was held recently in here.
Yes, it was. Yeah, that was the first year we got to hold it here, and it was very exciting.
But it's always been, I guess, part of a Acworth Business Association sponsored meeting?
Yes.
Great.
Yep, every February.
Great. What all does the Acworth Business Association do?
We have a lot of networking opportunities for businesses, advertising opportunities, and then we give a lot back to the community. I think last year we gave $30,000 to the schools and the civic organizations last year. We do Taste of Acworth. That's our biggest fundraiser of the year. One thing that I brought to ABA a few years ago is to bring in membership levels. And you can go ahead and pay for all your sponsorships at once, rather than, it helps budget, because you're not trying to wait and see, can I do this or can I do that? You can just write the one check and be done with it.
Yeah. Well, you had talked earlier about being an academic counselor at North Cobb Christian. Before that, you were up at Alatoona Elementary in Bartow County. And you talked about that a little bit, but why don't you talk about the founding of Brookwood Christian School?
Okay. My daughter, Kristen, was she was in second grade, and we were at High Meadows in Roswell. We lived in East Cobb at the time, and she just wasn't learning to read, and she just hit a wall where she wasn't going any further. And we found out that she's dyslexic. And so I had been taking her to tutoring and private school and resource classroom and vision therapy and occupational therapy. With dyslexia, there are a lot of things that go with it: the eye movements, the balance, riding a bike, bilateral coordination doesn't work very well.
When did you first suspect that she was dyslexic?
When she was in kindergarten, she just wasn't making as much progress. It just wasn't sticking. They would go through phonics, but they would go through it and then move on. And so phonemic instruction is a little more specific than phonics. And so she needed to have phonemic instruction where you start with just the smallest sound and then you build on that. So I had started studying the Wilson Reading Program, which is Orton Gillingham based, and had just gotten to the point where I felt confident working with her. I was adding up how much I was spending, and it was going to be $40,000 a year to educate my child back in 2003.
Wow.
Yes. And so my in-laws said, oh, we'll help. And I said, well, if you can loan me that amount one time, I think I can help a lot of children.
Oh.
And so they gave me a loan, and we were able to buy equipment and materials and hire teachers, and we started in a church. So what had happened was I'd brought Kristen home to homeschool her because she wasn't making progress in second grade, and I felt like I had learned enough by that point that I could work with her on my own.
Did you give up your job at that time?
Yes, I had given up my job, and I was working a little bit to supplement income doing foreign adoptions. So I was working.
Foreign adoption?
Yes, as a social worker. We knew that we were adopting at some point, and we got involved with this hosting group. So I was able to not work at a school, and I did that for a little while, and we ended up getting our second daughter that way. But with Kristen, I brought her home to homeschool. Then within a couple of weeks, I was homeschooling probably 5 kids around my kitchen table.
Wow.
And then moved to a church and rented a little space from them. And
Which church was it?
It was, the church doesn't really exist anymore. It was Northwest Baptist.
Okay.
So there's a different church there now. So we had seen changes coming, and that's one reason why we knew that we needed to get our own space. But getting ahead of myself, we rented space from them. We ended up with 18 students that first year. And so I hired a couple of teachers to help me out. And we ended up getting accredited as just a regular school. So we had looked into just accreditation as a homeschool group, but ended up getting accredited. So we had 3 teachers with master's degrees and experience.
Wow.
And so for 18 kids, so we got our accreditation that first year by November.
Who does the accreditation?
GAC, Georgia Accrediting Commission. It's out of University of Georgia.
Okay.
And it allows our students to get the Hope Scholarship if they qualify. So it's a fully accredited program.
And were the children's parents paying tuition at that time?
Yes.
To support the teachers?
Yes.
So you were able to pay the teachers a salary?
Right.
And pay yourself a salary?
I didn't pay myself a salary for a long time.
Is that right?
But, so after about maybe 3 or 4 years, I started taking a salary.
Okay. So 2004, 18 students?
Yes.
And how many teachers each year?
3.
3 teachers? That includes you?
That includes me, yes.
So you have 2 teachers to pay.
Right.
And then how much does the school grow over time?
Now we have just under 60 and 60 students. And so we bought property in 2007 and built our first Little Red Schoolhouse. And so we started out with about maybe 25, 28 kids when we were there. And just as we moved in, the economy collapsed. And so it was really tough, and I was really sweating it. But we were able to stay afloat and do well. And then in 2018, we added a second building to the campus because we couldn't fit everybody in the first building. We were having teachers who rotated from classroom to classroom when another teacher had planning time.
Right.
So we were overcrowded and needed that second building.
And this is, Wood Street and North Main Street?
Yes.
And so you've got 2 buildings now?
Yes.
you have plans for further growth, or?
Maybe if needed. It would be nice. Right now we have 1st through 7th grade in one building and 8th through 12th grade in another building.
So all the students are dyslexic?
They are all either dyslexic or they have some kind of language processing disorder where there is auditory processing or just slow processing, but they all have a normal IQ, but have a learning disability.
Right. And how many teachers are there now?
We have 10.
10? 10 for 60 students?
Yes.
So they get a whole lot of one-on-one
They really do.
treatment.
And we use multi-age groups also. What we do is we test the kids when they come in, and within a couple of years, we're not going to put a 1st grader and a 7th grader together, but 1st through 3rd grade, we'll usually put them together in 1 or 2 groups. And so what we do is we find out their actual reading grade level and math grade level, and then we put them in classes according to that.
Okay. And the name Brookwood Christian School, are you affiliated with a church? Or?
No. No, when we first started out, we were with Northwest Baptist, but we incorporated on our own and got our 501c3 in 2007. So, and the kids actually named the school.
I was going to ask where the name came from.
So their favorite things to do were, the church had a nature trail behind it, and they loved to go out in nature, and they loved to be in the woods. And so they loved to walk down to the lake. And so the trail would go back through to the side of the lake where the water treatment plant is over there. So behind Target. And so they would walk, that was their favorite thing to do, was to walk down through there. And so they wanted something, they liked being out in nature. And so we wanted something with a nature sound to it.
Right.
And so we thought of all the words we could think of and put them up on the board and put words together. And that was the one that they came up with.
Do you get support from any of the churches?
One church came in, and Freedom Church came in on MLK Day, and they painted a room for us.
Did they? Okay.
So we get things like that. They'll do service projects. And so that was in conjunction with the city of Acworth and their MLK Day celebration. They always do a service project.
Do you have a foundation or anything to raise money for the school?
We do have a development director, and so we'll do activities throughout the year that Acworth is such the people still like to gather and do things together, so we'll do events. We do a spring tea where we have a silent auction. We do a motorcycle ride led by Chef Henry, and this year we're adding a concert called Dyslexia Rocks, and it'll be at the Cowan Historic Mill. And so we'll have a couple of local bands, Men in Blues and Three Left Standing, that are very popular bands in Cobb County. Will be there. And so we'll have the Tom and Chi food truck and the Hawaiian Shave Ice food truck and some others, and have a good fun night.
Yeah, great. Well, I guess the oldest, you've got 16 years of history of the school now, and I guess I was going to say your daughter would probably be the oldest, but there are probably some students that were older than her when the school opened. Do you have tracking of how the students have done, how many have gone on to college, and how many have graduated from college and such as that?
Yeah, probably at least 75% go to college, and then the others usually go into the workforce. And we've got several in college now. Several have graduated. I think we've had maybe 30 graduates so far since 2012. So my daughter was in the first graduating class. We'd have 1 or 2 graduate here and there.
Right.
And so she was in the first class, a huge class of 4.
Okay.
And so she had been joint enrolled with Chattahoochee before she graduated. And we usually have at least one student who join enrolls with them while they're in high school.
Oh, okay.
And then our kids, they don't read as quickly or write as quickly. So a lot of times it will take them longer than 4 years. It might take them 6 years or more.
There's no cure, I gather.
There's not. They can learn to read quicker, and the way they do that is the part of the brain that has word recognition skills never turns on for a dyslexic student, but they can be taught a workaround. And so this has been shown with thermal photography, that part never lights up, but the neurons around it will light up as they are sounding out the words.
Wow.
So they may have to see it, 10,000 times to be able to really sound it out quickly.
Yeah. When she went to Kennesaw, did they, I know we've got a department that's supposed to support students like that.
Yes.
Did she get adequate support at Kennesaw?
She did, and at Chattahoochee as well. When she was at Chattahoochee, the disabilities coordinator was actually a former student of mine from Cartersville High.
Is that right?
And that was wonderful to keep up with her and have her take care of our students. But at Kennesaw, yes, she did get disability services there as well. She could get online versions of her textbook. She could have testing in a quiet place, one-on-one, if she needed anything read to her. But by that time, she really didn't. And she could have extra time for testing.
Was Carol Pope still working at Kennesaw, or had she retired?
I'm not sure. Yeah.
With the disability services.
That I'm not sure.
She may have been retired.
With her being an adult, I really couldn't be involved in it anymore. So, so she had to take care of that herself.
What year did she graduate from Kennesaw?
She graduated in 2017, I think, or was it 18?
And then went straight from there to teach at Brookwood Christian?
Yes, she did. And so she did the Montessori program at Kennesaw.
Okay.
And so I think that has really helped her with the hands-on principles needed for our students. And so after she started working for us, she did the internship with Gordon College to get certified as a dyslexia practitioner.
Okay.
So she was able to do that within the first year, in her first year of teaching.
Wow, that's great. Did your second daughter just go through public schools, or?
No, she actually went with us. She went to Brookwood because the methods we use for dyslexia students work perfectly for students learning English as a second language.
Oh, I bet.
So it teaches them the structure of the language, and it works beautifully. What I've found is a lot of times students are not taught how to read when they move here from a foreign country.
Oh, my goodness.
Unless they come at an early age and go through kindergarten, they're just kind of thrown into a reading situation. They have ESL textbooks, English language learner textbooks, but there's not a lot to teach them how to read.
Wow, how about that? Well, maybe if you wanted to branch out, you could do it with ESL students.
We've had several. We haven't had a student for a couple of years, but we do have students all the time who have recently been adopted from foreign countries.
And you go all the way through 12th grade?
We do.
School? And let's see, now your husband's teaching there now too?
He is. He teaches English there.
And before that, is interesting that you said that he was involved with the foundation for the Booth and Tallis Museum.
Yes.
In Cartersville.
He did IT there. He came on board when they first started the Rycon Management Company. He had worked for the cable company and ended up taking a job with the Booth Museum. Well, Tallis wasn't there yet, but they were just starting to build the Booth Museum when he came online with them.
And he also graduated from Kennesaw?
He did. We're a Kennesaw family.
I guess so.
We have 3 graduates.
Okay. What about your younger daughter?
My younger daughter went to North Georgia Tech above Gainesville, and she majored in photography.
Okay.
So she's my artsy child.
Okay. Well, that's great. Why don't you talk a little bit about some of the people that have influenced you? You mentioned Abby Parks. What about Tommy Oligood?
I think he is very positive and welcoming and just encourages people to get involved And it wasn't difficult to get involved in Acworth. You know, all you really have to show is dependability and a desire to get involved, and there's always a job for you. But Tommy's been very much of an encouragement to me since I've been here. And the first time I met him, he said, "Now, if I can do anything for you, you let me know." And so, of course, I have time and time again.
Okay.
When we started the school and when we were looking for property, I sat down, or I had talked to Tommy, and we actually got together. It was me, my realtor, Joe. It was Tommy. It was Brian, the city manager.
Yeah.
Everyone got together in a room, and we looked at a map of the city and looked at properties that were available or might be available. And so they helped me decide where we could put it.
So you didn't have to fight City Hall?
No.
They came to your support from the
They
beginning?
did, from the very beginning. I felt very strongly that it needed to be in the Acworth city limits. And I'm so glad that we made that decision, because it, as trying as it is to purchase and build, it wasn't nearly as bad as it could have been.
Yeah. Wow. Sounds like a huge risk on your part, though, to make this kind of investment.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's nice to know that the people in city government are supporting you.
Yes, definitely.
And you mentioned in terms of influences, a whole lot of merchants, neighbors,
Right.
city employees, as well as the Acworth Business Association.
Absolutely. I don't think where we would be where we are today without all of that. The city's really embraced us, and the city, not just employees or the civic part of it, but the members of the community have really embraced it. And there's a camaraderie. A lot of the people who live downtown also have businesses downtown. And it's kind of like we're in this together kind of attitude. And I really felt like, once my daughter was a teenager, and that she could walk downtown by herself. And I also knew that I knew all the merchants, and that if she did anything that, I would know for sure. Knew she wouldn't misbehave, but also knew that they would be watching out for her.
That sounds like a typical small town.
It does.
What was your relationship with the principals of the public schools and other private schools as well?
It's really wonderful. I've gotten to know them through the Acworth Business Association. My public school experience was Bartow County and Cartersville, so of course, I still have those contacts who helped me tremendously in starting the school. But they've just kind of taken me in as one of them, and a lot of times there's like a divide between public and private schools, but they've been really accepting and encouraging. And we were started by public school teachers, so who just said, this is not working for some kids, and there's got to be a better way.
Oh, okay.
And so I think that they respect that and respect the way that we do things.
Yeah, so they had to be highly motivated, because I would assume that they had to take a pay cut to start out.
Absolutely.
So you have a team of highly motivated people that teach in the school.
Absolutely, yeah. It's definitely not the pay that motivates them. But what it is they...
Well, nobody goes into teaching because they're motivated by money, I don't think.
That's true. That's very true. What they do get is they get the autonomy to say, this isn't working, I need to do something different, or this curriculum's not working, we need to replace it with this curriculum. And so they actually get to have a lot of control of what they teach and how they teach it.
Yeah. And to me, it sounds like heaven to have that 10 teachers, 60 students, the 1-on-6 relationship.
Right. Now, one of our students may be as much work as 10 students, but
yeah, for sure.
in some classes.
But still, just to be able to focus on
Right.
A particular need and deal with it.
Right, yeah, it's a lot easier to grade 30 essays than it is to grade 150 essays.
Absolutely. You mentioned one of your neighbors, Annette Arnold, and she had a quote that you mentioned. Why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, we were at one of our gatherings, one of our neighborhood gatherings this past weekend, and I was sitting with Annette Arnold, and she said, you know, I've seen so many people come to Acworth and have their dreams come true.
What do you think she meant by that?
I think she meant, you know, for example, Henry with Henry's Louisiana Grill started his restaurant. I think, you know, her family has done well. Her brother-in-law Drew and sister-in-law Susan, and then her husband David. They've had successful careers here, and I think a lot of it is the businesses that we've started and nurtured and helped each other with. Daniel Hildebrand with Pearl Spa, you know, able to come in and be supported and get with the Acworth Business Association. And just, it seems like the people who are really highly motivated, if they can find their niche that is something that is in line with the culture of Acworth, that they can do well.
Great. We'll talk about some of your fond memories.
When we first moved here and the kids were younger, they loved going to see Santa at Santa's arrival, and so they went from watching the parade to being in the parade, dressing as elves, and just a lot of fond memories. They were so excited. So we still go, even though the girls may not go. We'll get together with friends and go hang out there. So that's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Snow days.
Snow days. Oh my goodness, snow days. At first we didn't have sleds, but we had kayaks. And so one year we got on the hill in front of McCall Primary and brought kayaks. And so we were going down the hill. There was a car that came by and a kayak grazed the bumper and scratched it all along the front, and we're like, explain that to your insurance agent. It was damaged by a kayak. But we'll bring sleds and four-wheelers or whatever. Like one year, someone had a four-wheeler and they had a rope with loops all the way down it, and so everyone would lie on their sled and hold onto the rope, and he would pull them up the hill, and then they would sled down the hill. And so one year somebody even brought like a fire pit out, and so we could warm ourselves on the fire pit, and so we would all end up in somebody's house or at one of the restaurants or whatever during the snow day, whatever was open. So again, we just all pull together and have this impromptu party all day long, just having fun, and whether we have kids in the house or not. So it's the 50-year-old adults are out there sledding and having fun with no kids.
Okay, that's great. Well, we talked about some of the things of the DDA, that Downtown Development Authority has been doing, particularly with regard to, I guess, the bridge and the Depot Park. Hadn't talked about the roundabout.
Right.
Where is the roundabout?
It is actually behind here. At the intersection. Right up this way. Right up that way.
Is that in operation now?
That is in operation now, yeah.
Well, I guess I haven't ventured up that way recently to go around the roundabout.
So Cherokee Street, just before you get to the railroad track, is where we have the roundabout. So there's a new plaza in between Cherokee Street and the tracks. It used to be a road, and so they closed off that road and made it pedestrian only.
And do you still have bonds to do that?
Yes.
But what did the DDA get some money from the city for its functions, or what kind of budget do you have?
We usually have. We had started out getting money just from a couple of properties that were in a DDA buyback program, and kind of saved that for a while. And then we started getting, as the economy improved, more and more of a budget from the city. So we can get up to think we've done up to $30,000 or $40,000 a year in facade grants.
Okay.
And so if someone is working on a part of their building, this is commercial buildings, any side that faces the street, you can get a grant to improve it, whether it's an awning or a sign. Well, we made sign grants separate now. Or if you have an old building that you need to bring up to code, you can get a grant for that, and then a sewer impact fee grant.
Right.
And so we give away probably about $30,000 a year to local businesses.
And they give you the authority to regulate what it looks like?
Exactly. It does have to
Okay.
be approved, right?
Okay. And that's money from the city that funds the facade grants?
Right. It is.
And it looks like something like maybe pass-through that you were talking about, that the DDA had some properties that they sold to different 1885 houses.
Yes.
Talk about that. How does
Okay.
that work?
There were some areas that either had to be purchased or the layout had to change in order to put the new road system through that we have around this building, the community center. And so when it was finished, there were some parcels that were left that could be sold to businesses. So one had been just kind of a pit, and so it had to be filled. And so as construction was done, all the dirt would be put there, or they would bring in dirt from other places as well. And so now that was sold to a restaurant group. And a lot of
And that's the 1885.
the 1885 house, yeah.
Right.
A lot of infrastructure had to be done, and so in order to enable them to do that, like there was like a sewer line running through one of the properties that had to be moved, and it was thought that it was defunct and not used anymore, but found out that it was, and so with this being the old downtown part, we're finding a lot of interesting things, but since they had to spend so much money to develop it, the city was able to put the property into the Downtown Development Authority, and so we could sell it to businesses for a lower price because of the development that they had to do to it.
Okay. What's the Schmidt property?
Okay, that is the property that is, there had been a house there, and the house had to be taken down for the road to go through. And it is at Lemon and North Side. And so that will be a mixed-use property where there will be some townhouses, there will be some storefronts for rent, there'll be storefronts for sale, condos. So it's very much a mixed-use property that's on a few acres, maybe 3 acres.
Oh, okay. And Taptown, what was your relationship with that?
That was also a DDA property, and Taptown is going to be a craft beer and wine restaurant and bar, and there'll be taps along the walls, and it'll look like an Old West along the inside. And so that was one of the properties was sold to Taptown, and then one of the owners was able to come on board at the DDA.
And you have a director for you're the president.
I'm the chair,
You're the chair.
Yes.
Do you have a director?
We do. That's Jeff Chase.
Okay.
So he's with Parks and Rec and Community Relations.
Okay. So it's connected with Parks and Rec. Okay. And so that becomes one of his many functions.
Right.
Okay. And how does that work? He does day-to-day type things?
Right. Right.
Manages the budget, whatever?
Right. And then he makes sure that we keep up our Main Street accreditation and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So the nuts and bolts.
Okay. And let's see, you've been Citizen of the Year in Acworth?
I have.
Which year was that?
That was 2016 that I was the Cobb Chamber.
Did you know ahead of time?
No.
You didn't?
I didn't. I almost didn't even go to the meeting because I wasn't feeling well. And I was like, I don't have anything to wear and I don't feel good. And I think I'm just going to stay home. And so
Somebody say you can't stay home?
they said, no, you really need to go. You'll be okay. Just go ahead and go. I'll take care of this. And so I went, and I was floored. I was shocked that it was me.
Wow. Well, that's quite an honor.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm about out of questions. What should we have talked about that we haven't? What would you like to add?
Geez, I don't know. It's just been a fun place to live. There's always a lot of fun things to do. We had the movie Footloose was filmed here, and I got to be part of that. So there's one shot in the movie where there are 3 heads on the screen, and one of them's mine.
Oh, how about that?
And so it was kind of like a, oh my, kind of moment. But there's always something going on, and I know Brian Bultice is responsible for a lot of that. He and Tommy together have said, we've got to create a place where people want to be and things that people want to do, and they've done a really good job with that.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.